Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome on day 2 of the 5G India 2022 6th International Conference on Digital Transformation with 5G. We are now ready to begin with the proceedings of our first session on day 2, which is Technical Session 1, on the topic India Readiness for 5G Infrastructure, and we'll have discussions on 5G from traits to real-world deployments, from trials to real-world deployments. And ladies and gentlemen, I have the proud privilege in inviting on stage our distinguished and eminent session chair, Shri Vikram Tiwathia, Deputy Director General, COAI. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Also inviting our eminent panelist, Mr. Sandeep Nagpal, Sales Consulting Director, Oracle Communications. A warm welcome to you. Inviting Mr. Manoj Gurnani, Chief Technology Officer and Head Strategy, Nokia India. A warm welcome to you, sir. Inviting Mr. Gilad Ben Arwe, CTO and Strategic Accounts Manager, Cognite APAC. A warm welcome to you, sir. Inviting Mr. Mike Stewart, Vice President, Production Management, Cineverse. A warm welcome to you, sir. Also inviting Mr. Deepak Saxena, Senior Vice President, Wireline Service, Cloud Xtel. A very warm welcome to you. And I may also invite our eminent speaker, Mr. Kishore Kumar, Business Head, 5G Strategies, APAC, Spirent Communications. A very warm welcome. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, a very warm welcome to Technical Session 1, where we'll have discussions on 5G from trials to the real-world deployments, India's readiness for the 5G infrastructure. And the time duration for the session is approximately 1 hour 30 minutes, which includes the opening and closing remarks by the distinguished chair, presentations by all our eminent speakers for 15 minutes each. We would request our speakers to kindly contain themselves, their presentations, and the time limit allotted to each one of them, that is 15 minutes. And we will have question and answers in the end after all the presentations are over, if the time permits. And ladies and gentlemen, before I hand over to our distinguished chair, I have the proud privilege of introducing him. Ladies and gentlemen, our eminent chair, Mr. Vikram Tiwathia, is the Deputy Director General at COAI. This is India's leading industry association for telecom, broadband, and digital services. He interacts extensively with the ICT industry, leadership, and senior officials at Department of Telecom, Ministry, and TRI, and other government offices for regulatory and policy matters. He is member of the Joint Working Group on Cybersecurity, chaired by the Chief Cybersecurity Coordinator. An active member of National Industry Associations, being CII, FICCI, SHM, TSDSI committees. He participates in many international workshops and conferences being conducted by ITU, APT, etc. He serves on the board of Global Certification Forum, GCF. And he has earlier worked with Tata Teleservices Limited from 2008 to 10, Confederation of Indian Industry CII as the CIO from 2005 to 8, and Indian Army Signals took voluntary retirement as the rank of colonel in the year 2005. And over to you, sir, for your opening remarks and to carry forward the proceedings.
Hello. All right. Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. So, thanks to Bharat Exhibitions and Sashi to get us all back into the hall after this long, break that COVID did. So it's good to have a warm body presence and, have a face-to-face gathering. So welcome to everybody. And I know it's a bit early in the morning, so we hope that some more folks will show up. A very energized session yesterday. And, there was a lot of good bonhomie around in the hall. And thanks to the cocktails as well. So that was kind of a little bit of spice in the evening as well. So we have a very eminent panel here today. I mean, collectively, probably 200 years of experience sitting in front of you. Some of the good news for India particularly is, yesterday I was at a US IBC event, and very eminent people from the United States industry, and what the Indian speakers said, that the international folks and industry and countries need to look at India and work with India, and if they don't do so, India will pass them by. And the hot, the really hot news and center of attraction was the India stack. I'm sure you all have heard of the India stack, but Sundar Pichai actually wrote to President Donald Trump, look at India, what they've done with the UPI. What have they done with the COVID vaccine management and the whole documentation around it? Where the United States was writing checks and sending them by US Post, here people were getting direct cash transfers. Now, how did that happen? It happened because India is in the top 5 countries for LTE availability. The marriage of the mobile phone as part of the JAM Trinity, Jandan Aadhaar Mobile. So the mobile's become a ninja tool, right? I mean, for everything, we all know if you leave home, you can leave your wallet, but if you leave your mobile phone behind, a challenge. But the good part is everybody sitting here in this room has put in so much of work and energy in building out this tremendous telecom and broadband network for this country. And this is admired globally now. And the India stack and the digital public goods, which actually the Ministry of External Affairs is now actively promoting, the Aadhaar for different countries as aid from India, UPI, CoWIN. So, even better, can you imagine, would GST have happened if you didn't have a broadband network? So the power of the mobile broadband and internet connectivity, the power is it can change the taxation system of a country. So see the benefit that is delivered right down to each citizen, to actually running the whole country. So that's really what the importance, and the government having recognized that this whole digital India movement. They recognize that you're not going to be able to have as many brick and mortar banks or have as many schools as was during the lockdown. In the village, the person who had a smartphone was the go-to person for everything. So, I'm just trying to underline the great work that all of you have done. And I'm happy to have this really great panel here today. And I'll just be introducing the speakers, and what would be nicer is if we leave some time for taking some questions, right? And to begin with, it's my proud privilege to welcome Mr. Sandeep Nagpal, who's the Sales Consulting Director for Oracle Communications. Yesterday, we had a very good conversation. I really, I was not as aware until yesterday as to the amount of investment that Oracle has got in the telecom vertical. So really good. And he comes with more than 25 years of experience and a really strong track record of meeting business goals and improving efficiencies across cross-functional teams. So over to you, Sandeep, for your address.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. I think it's a real pleasure to be part of this distinguished panel today, and I agree with Mr. Vikram that to meet you in person after 2 years. So we have been doing a lot of virtual interactions, I think, in the last 2 years. So it feels really good to now be able to attend these events in person. Exciting time for everybody associated with the telecom industry in India, right? So 5G is around the corner. We heard yesterday, from the operator community how they are really working round the clock to introduce these services in India as early as Diwali of this year. And I think over the next year, they will actually, hopefully, have nationwide 5G available in India. So what I plan to do today is Oracle, with their cloud native core portfolio, has been helping the early adopters of 5G technology across the globe for the last 5 years. So we, along with our portfolio, have collaborated tier 1 operators along the globe, and most of our deployments are live today. So I plan to share some of the learnings and insights which we got from those deployments, and hopefully they'll be very relevant to the operators in India, as well as some learnings for the future as well, right? So that is the whole objective of today's session. So to begin with, I would like to share a few insights, as to where we are coming from. Anybody associated with the telecom industry would realize that one of the most important building blocks of any telecom networks is the core of the network, which is responsible for signaling. In 5G, as per the standards, this core becomes a cloud native core, which is a paradigm shift from the way the core was designed in the past. Now, getting the cloud native core right the first time is going to be very essential for the kind of growth which everybody is envisaging with 5G. So I'll share two data points which actually are very relevant. So there is one report which IDC had published quite recently, where they have clearly mentioned that in the next 3 to 5 years, the amount of data which is going to be consumed globally is going to exceed the amount of data which is consumed in the last 30 years. So that is one data point. So we talked about exponential growth, but this is way beyond that. The second data point which was shared in this particular report is that again in the same period when 5G is going to be rolled out, connected devices are going to end up consuming more data than the consumers, right? Which is more from the enterprise industry. So this is another data point. So you can just think about the kind of scale we are looking at. If you have to manage this kind of a scale in the future, I think the most important is how you build your network. The foundation of the network should be such that it can meet these kind of growth requirements in the future when it comes to scale. So this is one aspect on the trend. The second aspect is when we go and talk to our customers globally, they are making trillions of dollars of investments in rolling out 5G networks, right? They want to ensure that their investment is future proof. They want to ensure that they get a faster return on their investment. All this is possible if you actually have a core which is designed on day one to meet these kind of aspects. And fundamentally what is different is the way 5G has been envisaged is it is supposed to address a whole new segment, revenue segment, which is the enterprise market. So unlike in the past where all the previous wireless technologies were actually focusing on, the consumers, here in addition to the consumer, you will have the enterprises which are going to largely benefit from the 5G. So that is the real importance of having the right kind of a cloud native 5G core. If I move ahead now, so when we talk about a core network in a 5G era, there are 3 or 4 fundamental aspects which we need to take care of, and this is based on our learnings with other operators across the globe. The first one is when you are going to build up these kind of core networks for the future, you need to build a 5G aware service mesh, make the network as plug and play as possible, because the growth is going to be, really exponential. If you have a network designed in such a way that you can just continuously keep on plugging and playing new capabilities in the future so that the expansion needs are taken care of, right, at any point of time, as well as new capabilities are introduced. So for that, 3GPP has actually come out with some specific network functions which make this possible. These technologies were already successful in the IT world. So we have seen what cloud has done in the IT world, when we talk about scale, security, or performance. So when you bring these aspects now to the 5G core network, we can easily, imagine what kind of benefits it will bring. So that is number one. The other aspect which is going to be important in any cloud native core network is the policy, right? So as we move from 4G to 5G, right, policy is an important network function in any cloud native core network, right? A unified policy management function makes a lot more sense, is something which we have been deploying with our customers globally. It helps them make the transition from 4G to 5G quite seamless, and the migration aspects, everything is taken care of. So our customers globally have liked this concept that we have some components which help them transition smoothly from 4G to 5G as well, because different customers will take different approaches. We heard yesterday people talking about SA, NSA, right? So there's nothing right and wrong. Everybody, as per their business objectives, will take different approaches to launch out 5G in India. So these kind of building blocks in the core of the network will make their life much more easier. And last but not the least, when we are building networks for the future, we need to think of programmability and automation built into the core itself, right? This will again make life easier, and we are going to actually discuss this in a separate topic in the future, how we can use technologies like AI ML inbuilt into the core of the network, which will actually automate a lot of the tasks which are being done manually today. Because in this kind of scale, traditional ways of planning, operating networks will not work. So we have to use new technologies like AI ML as well. So let me now move to some of our live references which we have globally, where what I just spoke about is already deployed, running since the last 5 years, right? So I just picked 3 examples on the screen, and I would like to share, what are the different approaches these operators took to launch 5G in their respective countries. So if you can see on the screen, 3 of the operators are US operators, tier 1 US operators, who used cloud native core from Oracle along with other network equipment providers as well, and built a best of breed core network. So their philosophy was simple. They believed that if you want to build a very high quality network, every component in the network should be the best quality, right? So it is a best of breed philosophy which they had. Second thing which they had in mind is automation should be inbuilt from day one. Everything should be open source. They should not face a challenge in the future like in the past where they were struck, because they didn't.
No worries, keep going.
Yeah, okay. So sorry for the interruption. I'll just wait for a minute for him to set it right. So I think it's some video. I think it's being played for some. So in the interest of time, maybe I can speak. I mean, maybe we don't need slides for that. So let's talk about 5G now. Globally speaking, I think more than 200 and almost 220 networks have already been launched, right? And I think the first thought which comes to you is that is India really late, right? So not really, because I think we are actually very appropriately timed, because now the ecosystem is very mature. We have all the device price points which are just right for a market like India. And similar questions were also asked, when 2G came. I think we took all the advantages of using the technology at just the right time, when the technology had matured, when the economies of scale had reached, and I think same would be the case when 5G will be launched. In terms of subscriptions, globally, I think more than 500 million subscribers already are in 5G, and by the end of 2022, the estimates are that 1.2 billion global subscriptions will be 5G based. And if you talk about the population coverage which 5G has globally, at the end of 2021, it was around quarter of the world, or the quarter of the population, which was covered by 5G. In another 4 years, which means by the end of 26, I think 2/3 of the world will be 5G. So that's the technology which is the future. We all know that. In terms of the devices, I think already a very mature ecosystem, and the point which I was trying to highlight, that by the time 5G arrives in India, you already have a huge advantage of a very mature device ecosystem. So 1100 plus devices already available commercially. Okay, now let's talk about some global trends. In terms of the mobile subscriber penetration, which means how many number of subscribers in terms of percentages are already 5G. So you'll see China, almost half of China already is on 5G, right? Their subscribers. You would expect South Korea, so around 40% or thereabouts subscriptions in South Korea, they are all 5G based. Rest of the world, and that includes US and the other developed countries, I think they are around 10 to 20%, right? So that again kind of underlines the fact that we are pretty much on time, and in fact actually more timely launch is only going to help our cause. So that's the triangle, the most reputed 5G triangle. So what 5G is really going to bring to the world is 3 things. One, of course, we know the capacity, right? The enormous speeds, which we talk about in the tune of gigabits per second. It also is going to bring huge amount of latency advantage, right? So on the radio side, we are talking about sub 1 millisecond latencies. And this is basically going to power all the enterprise applications, we talk about smart grid, we talk about smart cities. I think all that will be possible only because of the latency which the 5G technology brings on table. Third, about connectivity. So we are not only talking about person-to-person connectivity in this world. We are also talking about machine-to-machine, machine-to-vehicles. Practically everything and anything in the world will be connected and wired. The key technology building blocks which is going to make possible would be the new spectrums. So we all saw the two C-band and the millimeter wave, the 5G waves. They were auctioned in India recently. There is going to be things like massive MIMO, beamforming, multi-connectivity, cloud. I think all in all these building blocks are going to do two things. They are going to bring more capability, they are going to bring more efficiency. And I think that's what I think most of the new generation technology will continue to do it, right? More capability and more efficiencies. Yeah. And what do I do with all these efficiencies and capabilities? I think the use case, I think at the end of the day, I think that's what we all want to hear. So let me give you some global examples in terms of the use cases. What we have seen is that in all the launches which have happened across the globe, the first and the foremost use case which has going commercial is the enhanced mobile broadband, which means more speeds, more immersive experience. People are talking about metaverse, right? You're talking about more engaged and more immersive AR, VR capability built into your communication. Your interactions therefore becoming more richer and more, entertaining. The second use case which most of the CSPs have done are the fixed wireless. And I think that's going to be very, very relevant in a country like India, where the fiber penetration is to the tune of 30%. I'm sure that will be another use case which we are going to see. So the fixed wireless is only going to increase the internet penetration in the country. So fixed wireless access, FWA. But if you really ask my personal choice in terms of which is the first 5G hero use case, I think it's going to be cloud gaming. And that's basically going to be possible because of the latency advantages which I just spoke about, right? So cloud gaming, by the way, is such a huge industry. I think it's almost to the tune of around 5 to 6 billion per annum globally. And I think India will be big in this field. So I think that's going to be really in the consumer side, my pick in terms of the use case in the 5G. 5G is not only about telecommunications. It's across it encompasses automobiles, it encompasses healthcare, medicine, so on and so forth, factory automation. And a lot of focus will therefore be shifting to the enterprise. There will be huge projects undertaken for automation, and you will actually see a lot of, if you talk specifically for a country like India, I personally would really love to see a lot of use cases emerging for agriculture, right? I think that's really needed and that's so relevant for us. So you'll see drone-based inspection, crop-based use cases, those will emerge. And all those will be enabled because of the latency and the connectivity and the speeds advantage of 5G. There is a lot of talk and there is a lot of hype about the connected cars, right? So of course that will happen, but if you ask me, I think in terms of the priority, I think it's going to take some time, and I think we can wait, till the time autonomous cars or the connected cars arrives in India. I think there have been, my pick would be in terms of some very, very relevant use cases in health sector, agriculture sector, factory automation. I think that's where I think India will stand to really benefit from having 5G. Yeah, so I think just diving a little bit deep into the enterprise segment, I think these are the few of the companies with whom Nokia has been working. The likes of Lufthansa, Deutsche Bahn, which is the German metro, then you have Toyota, Volkswagen, and then we talk about some ports, the port Olu. All these things are based on the Nokia powered private networks. And they have been the classic cases of bringing the operational efficiencies and increasing the productivity into the enterprise side. Believe me, there is no hype in terms of what I was talking about. I'll talk about the use case which is today present in India, and that's Nokia's Chennai manufacturing plant. We have implemented most of the Industry 4.0 use cases in Chennai, right now working live. And we have personally done a lot of studies for the past 2 years. 86% lead time reduction. So there have been use cases related to the material management. We have been using drones. There have been use cases related to the spares part management, training the labor, be very, very nimble and flexible in terms of changing the product, the assembly lines, whenever the product actually changes, things like those. So I think these things are already live and working today as we speak. Let's talk specifically about India again. Yes, I think we have done trials with all the 3 leading CSPs, and I think India is one market which really surprises the world. And I think Vikram talked about COAI and the other UPI successes, and I think 5G is going to be pretty much the same. I mean, I say this with a lot of confidence. I mean, look at these stats here. Even before the 5G has arrived, we are like the biggest data consumers in the world, right? One of the CSPs today has the network which carries more data in the world than any other operator, and that includes the US and China also, right? Just imagine what if 5G comes, right? So in terms of the per capita consumption, we are talking about 7G, 17 gigabits per month per user. That's enormous. So we Indians really talk a lot. We really, thrive on the entertainment. We are sports lovers, and I think we are going to really see something which is going to be really very transformational. A very important thing, and that's based on the Ambit survey or the Nokia internal survey which we did. In terms of the video consumption, 40% actually gets consumed on local basis. So these are regional videos. And I think that's going to be another thing which is going to be very unique to India, right? The content is going to be very local. Most of the use cases, you will be surprised, will be very, very local, and they are going to be very region specific. So you're going to see a lot of innovation going forward. In terms of what we see, I think we did some studies and we figured out that in terms of the subscriptions, I think India will be coming to, by the year 2026, around 350 million subscribers. So I think in terms of penetrations will be around, in and around 30% or thereabouts, which is going to be huge. And in terms of the service revenue, I think again, by the year 2026, it's going to be roughly 10 billion kind of in industry, right? So it brings huge potential and huge promise. So how is Nokia shaping up, I mean, to embrace 5G in India? We are all fully geared up. Right now, the focus really is to ensure that the rollout happens. And there have been huge pressures to ensure that all the 5G gear actually gets rolled out. The announcements, as you know, have already been made for the 5G launches by all the leading CSPs. And we as Nokia have to ensure that we are always, living to the promise and the potential of a true 5G partner. So if you talk about Chennai, I think Chennai is one factory where 5G is already manufactured, not today, but for the past 2 years. We have been making 5G base stations for US and other sites of the globe already, right? So we are all geared up to, I do believe that bulk of the India requirements will be met by Chennai factory itself. We've got huge amount of R&D setup, and actually the 16,000 workforce of Nokia is the biggest which Nokia has in terms of any country. So India is the biggest employer for Nokia with this 16,000 workforce. We have R&D centers in Bangalore also. We do have the Global Delivery Center, which actually manages and does the project management of all the global networks all across the world. We also have a sales support organization back in Noida, and we, of course, are headquartered in Gurgaon. That's my last slide. What are the 5G success factors really? So I've named 5 for us. I think backhaul, and that I told you because India is actually only 30 to 33% penetrated. So in terms of the base stations, I think only 1/3 of the base stations are fiberized. For a true 5G experience, it's imperative that we have a good fiber connectivity. And in the areas where geography is very challenging, of course, we'll have solutions like the E-band microwave, which will do the job of a fiber. The second is a device ecosystem, and I think that's obvious, right? So we are a very price-sensitive country, and one of the lowest ARPUs in the world. And therefore, I think it's very important to have the affordable yet feature-rich devices. And I think that will happen. We have seen that happening in 2G. We have seen that happening in 4G also. And I see no issue in that, really. My third thing would be that we should have easy regulatory compliances, and that's actually already happening. And the government has actually taken rapid strides in terms of ensuring that we have the single window clearances, ROW. We have the Sugam portal also, which was launched. There have been massive work done in terms of other regulatory compliances like the mandatory testing, the TC, the trusted product, the NSDTS, which Vikram is actually leading himself. And my fourth thing will be very important, and that's where, again, the young generation of India is going to contribute, the upskilling and the 5G competence build-up. And Nokia, for example, actually has got a very reputed certification 5G course, which runs across the various technology areas. This is to enable the students and the academia to be in touch with what's happening in the world, right? So to create the technology. So we are not only going to be doing these certifications for the technology which has already been created. I think we have to also create new IPRs and patents and new contribution. There is a lot of work which is happening in the 6G as we speak, right? 5G is not launched, but 6G work has already started, and Nokia is actually playing a big part in all the relevant 6G task forces of the DOT. My last thing, I already kind of underlined, the use cases have to be very India specific, right? So what might actually work in US or Korea or China might not actually work in India. I would still love to see a lot of contribution of technology coming in health sector, medicine, and agriculture. I think that's going to be, in short, the real contribution of 5G to our country. So with that, thank you, Vikram.
Company who is, a monetizing partner. So he's going to be talking to us about how do you monetize 5G services, where do you actually have to go make money. And he has over 27 years of experience, and as part of Cineverse, he's been designing LTE, IPX, and diameter signaling services, and now focusing on building the 5G portfolio. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much. I just want to let everyone to know it's my first time in India, and I really appreciate the hospitality that's been extended to me while I've been here. We had an opportunity to meet with our customers here, and it's very interesting learning about the auction, the successful auction of 5G spectrum here in India. When I was back in the US and I heard about that, I instantly thought, oh, well, India is now starting 5G. No, I was wrong. India has already started 5G a long time ago. The good news for India that you have spectrum now is that you have been doing your homework, and you're going to be a really, I think, fast launch to providing 5G services to your subscribers here in India. And I think also coming into the game now, you have the advantage of all of the lessons learned by the global industry providers and by the other mobile network operators that have been working and deploying 5G. You should really take advantage of that experience, and I think it's going to help you even be more successful in rolling out 5G. I'm really excited about what I heard these last few days and where we're headed with 5G. The other thing that I want to say is I'm really concerned about law enforcement knowing that I'm checking my milk in the refrigerator, so we'll talk later about that. But thank you for having me. So I only have a few slides here, and I wanted to really focus on what is necessary in order for an operator to make the transition to 5G, and talk about what does that mean from a monetization perspective. Because quite frankly, monetization of 5G today still is not happening the way we envision it. And the reason for that is we have to build that infrastructure. The infrastructure we've been talking about here is very important in supporting not only the use cases that we are familiar with today, but also those use cases that we don't know about. The availability of the broadband service and the attributes of 5G that's bringing to the table will create new revenue opportunities for the mobile operators as well as enterprises around the globe. We like to think we know what the next steps is, and we like to show charts with expected ARPU and revenue that's going to be created. But at the end of the day, we've got a lot of work to do to get the infrastructure in place in order to be able to provide those monetization opportunities. It's a bit of a leap of faith, because right now I would challenge every operator globally that's deploying 5G to really have a solid revenue plan. It's tough. It's really, really tough. So with this leap of faith, what is that going to take? Well, it starts with radio coverage. Sounds easy? It's not. We need to provide that coverage so that, number one, we can get the higher density and broadband and lower latency that 5G promises. Without radio coverage, your 5G core is useless. So what we've seen globally is operators are deploying their 5G radio network first, and they're deploying their core at a later stage. I think India, from what I've heard in the last few days, India is going to be a much more accelerated timeline than what we've typically seen. I think the Indian operators will be working both on providing 5G core and coverage at the same time, which is a great plan, because that allows you to be quicker to the market to be able to provide those services to your consumers. The other aspect of taking advantage of the technology are the devices. We've heard many times about 5G devices and, devices for India and the affordability of those devices. The good news is that the device manufacturing community has been at it for about 2 years now. There are, I forget the latest count from the GSA, but there's probably 1,000 devices available in the market, maybe not for the India market. But I think that the device manufacturers, because of this 2-year time frame that they've been able to spend on getting 5G devices available, you're going to have a wide array of devices available for the Indian consumer. And that's very important. Again, 5G devices, 5G radio coverage is a key component of being able to provide services to your customers. The other part of the devices are what I call the M2M IoT devices. Many of those devices today are even back to 2G. What are we going to do when India decides we're going to shut down our 3G network? You're going to have a whole new slew of devices, IoT devices, enabled components that are going to make use of the new spectrum. And again, those are use cases that will come about. Monetization is going to drive that. The last, what we've been talking about a lot in these last few days is with regards to 5G services. What does that really mean? I think we have a good idea what it means to the end subscriber, the person carrying a mobile device in their hands. We understand that. Now, they're going to have a great access to different services, more security, maybe some enhanced gaming opportunities with their mobile device. But 5G is not a story about the person with a device in their hand. 5G is a story about enabling non-human related devices on 5G and the use cases that are going to be supported by those components. We've just seen a real growth of IoT. After many years of talking about M2M and IoT, We're really starting a resurgence of that, and I think 5G is going to drive very heavily a resurgence of IoT, of use cases that have to do with manufacturing, transportation, other things that, other areas that have not traditionally been connected over the mobile network. So we've seen some of these use cases before. Augmented reality, autonomous devices, transportation, shipping logistics, manufacturing, private networks. You're looking at your next monetization opportunities here. This is where the operators are really going to have to understand where they play a role in providing services to these industry verticals. When in the US and possibly here in India, when the mobile operators deployed 4G, they were almost relegated into just the pipe provider, just the connectivity provider. I don't think that's where we want to be as operators in India for 5G. We want to provide more than the network. The network is what's going to enable those use cases that the mobile operator will be able to provide to these industry segments and be very successful in monetizing the vast investment that you're making. So to get us back on track, 5G is the foundation for monetization. Let's ask ourselves, how are we going to take all this great technology, all of these great capabilities, and turn that into an opportunity to monetize the investment, to enhance our customers' experience, and to provide new benefits and opportunities for other industries to advance using this technology. And with that, I'll close. Thank you. And we'll talk later. We have a booth out here in Cineverse. If you want to talk one-on-one, I'm available. Thank you very much.
Mike, thank you very much, and also extra thanks for being helpful in keeping it short. So with that, on the question of monetization, like even in yesterday's discussion, it is really tough. Because the current average revenue, or ARPU, is just about 200 in India. And with all the investments that will go, you know, just the spectrum is 1,50,000 crores, plus the capex in the radios and in the network in right of way. So imagine actually service delivery at what cost. And there's a huge market out there, but yes, monetization is going to be really at the heart of a lot of the efforts for the telcos to put in everybody. And you know, I can foretell advertising blitz coming up to try and, you know, sell you some good 5G service, right? One of the things that, you know, in mobile networks, which tends to get undermined a little, is the huge amount of wireline effort to deliver the wireless. And, you know, it doesn't get spoken of much. So with that, we have Deepak with us. And Deepak is going to talk about the wireline part in the wireless network. And Deepak is an ITS officer of the 93 batch, extensive work across a variety of, you know, telecom networks. And of course, he's done BSNL, Reliance Infocom, Voda Idea. Over to you, Deepak.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for giving the opportunity. Just as we said that, we have heard that how 4G is going to shift to 5G. So some of the things we have already heard, that how the things are going to change. So latency is going to, you know, reduce drastically. The number of connected devices, which is going to increase tremendously. The kind of capacity requirement is going to increase. And what are kind of services? We have all heard about this. I'm just repeating some of the things just to make the context that we need applications which are more sensitive from a latency perspective and from bandwidth delivery perspective. So those things which are currently not there with 4G, we are going to expect that this is going to come once we have 5G available. But all said and done, as everybody has said, that for delivering this kind of services, what everybody has discussed, is only possible when we have proper infrastructure available. And when I say proper infrastructure, it means both active, passive, and at desired timeline, at desired cost. So if anything is not happening, if the cost is high or if the delivery timelines are not there, we are not going to get what we are expecting from 5G. Just to give a broad perspective that how the things are going to change from an infrastructure perspective, the number of sites which currently we have is at least going to be 6 times. With the kind of private LTE is going to come, the kind of operators are thinking of giving various kind of applications, the number of sites are going to increase tremendously. Secondly, we require the kind of bandwidth we are expecting and the kind of latency we are expecting. These sites should be connected on fiber. So not all 100%, but at least 70%. So currently you think the current number of sites which are on fiber is 30 to 50%, depending on the operator and depending on the geography. Now, 6x sites to be connected on by 70%. So you can see the amount of fiberization which is required. Although some of the sites will get covered by use of E-band radio, which is new policy which is came, PMP and FSO to some extent, but still 70% of 6x sites, so you can think of the kind of fiberization which is required. Now, this is not possible if we don't have proper policy for implementing the same. So earlier we have two major poles, you can say, who are deciding what is to be done. One is the regulatory authorities, and second was telco. And they are trying to do some of the things, but third, neutral players started coming for tower and fiber and other places. But now what we need is an independent NAS provider who can give you tower, fiber, so that all three becomes a part of the ecosystem. Regulatory authority should have they have to ensure that they make policy which are, which avoid inconvenience to the public. Telco operator should focus on how they can give proper services, what is being desired for giving all those kind of services, and NAS provider should ensure that they are providing proper infrastructure at proper time at desired cost to them. The only thing which we are hearing that although the policies are coming to ensure that infrastructure is being built up at a lesser cost in fast timeline, but there's a huge difference from the intent of policymakers versus how it is being getting implemented on ground. Still, some of the authorities feel that, and we have read too much about what are the policies here and what are the policies outside India where they have good infrastructure. The only difference is that the policy owners should ensure that the policy is such that they should not encash while the infrastructure is getting built. If you start thinking that this infrastructure is going to milk too much of cash and you start charging while the infrastructure is getting built, you are not able to get the kind of infrastructure which you are asking for. So all those overhead cables and the cluttering on the tower which you are seeing that means the demand is there. But since the policy is not there or the timeline of the policy is not appropriate, people have laid in that unstructured way, which is giving an inconvenience to the public and also the kind of availability of the network. Just to tell you, in India, we are investing 3 times of the OPEX for the kind of network which we are managing, just because it's not getting shared. So if we share the network, you can see the OPEX cost all across all operators is going to reduce 1/3. So that much amount of money is available in case if we go for sharing and we have the right policy to ensure that. I'm focusing so much of sharing, but in case if we go for sharing, hypothetically that, okay, we start sharing. But even if we start sharing, we have new kind of challenge which is going to come. And that is that suppose all the towers, if we agree that, okay, all towers will get shared among all the operators, do we have the space available on the towers or not? It's not. So in case if the tower is getting shared, somebody has to put at X height, then other has to compromise, either they have to go above or below the same height. So we have to ensure that we have to have some solution to overcome how we can ensure that the same infrastructure is getting shared and we are able to serve all the telcos the way they want to have their radio network. If the tower heights, if the antenna heights are different, then one or the other operator has to compromise on their radio planning. So there are two ways of overcoming this particular solution. One is the deployment of a small cell, which for 5G basis, it is a very small, low power wireless transmission, which can serve and give a very specific kind of requirement from a latency perspective and from a capacity perspective. A small cell of low power can, give a coverage of 70 to 80 meters in very dense urban, because most of the small cell deployment will happen only in urban to start with. And a high power will, serve you around 200 to 300 meters in a very dense urban area. On the rural, it can go up to a kilometer, but the kind of deployment which is going to happen is in urban centric only, and which will, able to serve the kind of application which you want to have, which is IoT devices, connectivity, automobiles, robotics, AR and VR. And just to tell you, we are one of the India's largest neutral host small cell providers. We have around 4,000 sites, and we are going great guns month on month and doing a lot of small cell deployment all across India. We are present around 300 cities. Now, this is what is already happening. But now the new thing which is going to happen is shared RAN. So you must be heard that the sharing of RAN is happening, but it is on a bilateral arrangement. So bilateral arrangement has some negative aspects that, to have trust, the kind of availability, that is missing. So this is the first time a neutral host is coming up with the shared RAN solution. And what is the difference, just to tell you? The normal sharing which happens when you are sharing only the infrastructure part, not the active part, you are sharing the tower, you are sharing the power supply, you are sharing the battery banks, you are sharing the backhaul, you are sharing the you are not sharing the BTS, you are not sharing the backhaul, you are not sharing the antenna. Spectrum is also not getting shared. But when you go to active RAN sharing, what is getting shared is everything other than spectrum. And this is where you can overcome all the issues of constraint on towers and areas where you don't have space to put towers or antennas. This is the solution for that, and you can overcome that. And just to tell you, we are the only one in India who are able to successfully demonstrate that we can deploy a neutral host shared RAN architecture, and we have deployed in Bombay at Bombay Central, and it is live since April 22 this month, and we have successfully demonstrated how two operators can work with in a very limited geography and at a CST station with the lean arrangement of network. Just to tell you how the network looks like. So all the things which is on dark, this side of the table is a telco equipment. So telco is only providing a fiber connectivity to the core of our network, and from there NMS, router, firewall is ours, and after that the whole station, the RRU, BBU, all antennas, everything belongs to us. Only operators are providing spectrum. So you can see that 2-3 operators can come on this particular network without only by giving a single port of fiber in their core network. So the kind of, if you see the deployment, this is the photos of Bombay Central, that you can see that only 2-3 antennas which are being placed, and it is serving all the opcos in that. So the kind of lean arrangement which we have done, and I would like everybody to go to Mumbai Central Station and check the speed, the speed which earlier you are getting when our solution was not deployed, and after this our solution is being deployed, it is 5 times in general. So you can see the long distance platforms, foot over bridges, local platforms, everywhere the speed which you are getting. And if you go to the CST Bombay Central, you see most of the people are hooked on videos, because the kind of quality which you are getting now is much more enhanced than what we were getting earlier. And if you can compare on this station and you go to any other station, you can see the difference, how the how the solution is getting deployed. So moving forward, just to summarize, 3 things. The policymaker should ensure that we have proper infrastructure. Second, it should getting shared. That should be the policy, that most of the places we should share the fiber so that we can reduce the OPEX. And even if we go to towers, because as the number of towers requirement of macro and microsite is going to increase, we should ensure that those are also getting shared. And even if that sharing is not possible in the places like airports, metro stations, where we have limited place available, and aesthetically we don't want too many antennas to be there deployed at those kind of places, we should go for shared rent solution. This is going to resolve most of the issues, and that's what we feel that in this NAS provider can play a very important role, so that we can focus. We have cracked that how to build infrastructure in a timely fashion at a time in a cost-effective manner, versus, and telco should focus on giving the kind of services which is required by the customer, and authorities, government authorities, please ensure that they make the policy which is implementable, and ensure that whatever you are desiring and whatever we are writing, and the same is getting implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deepak. I think that was very exciting. So I'm happy to share with everyone that from COAI, we've just concluded conduct of 4 pilots for small cell deployments along with the GMR in T3 terminal, in Kandla port with the Kandla authorities, Bhopal Smart City and Namma Metro. So this was an effort along with the TRAI and all the telcos to deploy small cells and the issues related. So Deepak, you know, the learnings from that exercise, TRAI is likely to come out with a recommendation. And I would urge you to also go and have a conversation at TRAI to share the good stuff that you've done. Because the potential, you know, there's a huge requirement of reducing the network costs, and particularly for a 5G deployment. The networks which you see on top of the rooftop have to come down, merge into street furniture and go inside buildings. Because almost 70% of total data is consumed inside buildings, either at place of residence or at place of work. And the amount during transit is not as much. So a huge amount of importance to small cells as well as in-building coverage. So that's important. Thank you very much. And with that, we come to the last speaker we have with us is Kishore. And Kishore, he's the business head for Spirent for APAC. And you know, one of the things is a leading test and measurement company. So typically, if you can measure something, you can deliver that thing. And for us in the telecom world, test and measurement is very important. And the recent mandatory testing requirement again to deliver quality of service, the government has come out with the MTCT scheme, which is for all the equipment going into the networks have to get a certification for conformance, performance, and interoperability. So happy to hand over to Kishore to hear what he's going to share with us. Over to you, Kishore.
Perfect. On this particular presentation, the last one of the day, before the break, I will walk through, kind of give you a report card of where exactly we are on 5G at the moment. You know, we know that we're looking at ultra low level latencies and high amounts of bandwidth, etc. Are we exactly there? Is the question. Being testing and measurement company, we've done some tests across the globe, and we will probably share that particular report as well, and kind of give you our experiences of having worked with over 1,800 customers today, 1,800 I would say engagements on 5G. If you notice that particular infographic there, you will see we did close to 800 engagements last year. We've already crossed 1,000 this year already. Multiple different domains that we focus upon, which we will also touch base later, and then multiple different categories of customers that we currently cater towards. We are industry leading solution providers for testing on the 5G and also being recognized by multiple different awards that you generally see there. So while we make this bold statement, let's see what's the current status of market. I know a lot of them have actually spoken about the number of networks being deployed, is in excess of 200, and we expect that to hit more than 400 in the next 2 to 3 years. We're also talking about SA and SA that we spoke about yesterday, right? Less than 10% of the networks today are running on SA architecture, which means they'll have a completely new radio, completely new 5G core against NSA, which means a new radio on 5G, but then the core is going to be a 4G core, trying to extend the life of the 4G core, with multiple different options. Now the interesting thing here is that, we spoke about these numbers, etc., but then what's very interesting is when we did these tests, globally, we noticed that the performance was not as expected with respect to throughput. We were able to clock close to 700 meg of throughput on the millimeter wave, and then within your mid-band, we were able to get close to the numbers that you actually see there. But then what's interesting is that the variance, in the mid-band was up to 7 times against millimeter wave, right? Which kind of echoes the fact that maybe, the enterprises might be a extremely good use cases for 5G to be able to monetize 5G going forward. But yeah, that's the kind of inferences we got. We spoke about latencies, right? We spoke about metaverses, we spoke about cloud gaming, for example, etc. We're targeting a latency. I mean, if you just go back and then recall the triangle that 5G tries to achieve, the IMT 2020 goal is like close to a millisecond of latency. We're still lingering around that 20 millisecond latency. That's the least we were able to clock on the deployed 5G networks today, which means with all these, it's pretty straight to be able to conclude that we are still in that nascent stage of 5G evolution, right? Now, there are 2 ways of looking at it. Why are we in that particular stage? The first thing, maybe because of technology. The second thing can be maybe because of the industry itself, right? So let's look at the technology perspective here, right? We spoke about thousands of devices that we already have, right? We spoke about multiple different ways of deploying, etc. But then consumers, when you start switching on 5G, with all the trial networks what we have done so far, the experience was not completely astonishing. Like, okay, I mean, we were able to get some good amounts of throughput, but then not something that 4G couldn't deliver, right? And then since we have multiple ways of deploying the networks itself, 4G and for 5G, for example, we have containers, we have orchestrators, we have AI-driven, ML-driven, etc. It's getting more and more complicated, right? 2016 was when we did the initial presentation with some customer in India on 5G. Beginning of 21 is when we started talking about security in 5G. That is when people started realizing the importance of security in 5G as well, which means now a lot of testing is being done, emphasis is being laid upon on security, and we do see a lot of requests coming into the company on testing security as well. As other speakers have actually pointed out, lawful interception, security within 5G, network slice security, private 5G, NPN networks, for example, unless they are completely secure, this migration happens, maybe a little later. That's from the technology perspective, right? Now, why is this actually lagging behind? It's like a chicken and egg problem, right? That's because we feel that the industry demand is still not there, right? We spoke about metaverses, for example. Metaverses is expected to hit the industry on a full-fledged fashion only after 27, 28 timeframe, right? So we don't have the demand so that we're able to create the technology to be able to meet that particular demand, right? Today we're focusing mainly on bandwidth, and that's where you see the entire graph being populated upon. But having said that, a lot of investments has been done here already. Industry players have been contributing significantly. A lot of testing is being done and is being completely done to be able to meet those needs. When we talk about this cloud gaming, AI, etc., it takes close to 10 milliseconds for us to comprehend the respective image, between your eyes and then your brain. Which means if you have to have that seamless experience of gaming, for example, metaverses, for example, having those multiple different avatars, you need to hit that sweet spot of 10 milliseconds latency. If not, it's not going to be a seamless experience, right? So we feel that due to these multiple different factors, what we actually spoke about, maybe we are still in that nascent stage of evolution. If you do a simple Google search on Spirent 5G benchmarking report, we did a study beginning of this year. we got multiple different respondents give us their feedback, operators and manufacturers, etc. The first question was, would people actually embrace 5G? The question is obviously yes, to be able to harness the new revenue streams. The second question was, what would they typically go back and then rely upon? Is it going to be a network built by a single vendor or multiple different vendors? The answer was more than 70% said that they would typically go with multiple different vendors. Right? Now the challenge is, since we come from that particular background of testing and measurement, we noticed that back in 4G days, it used to have probably one single vendor or two different vendors depending on circle to circle. It used to have a predictive number of cycles of software releases and testing as well. But with 5G, I think Sandeep, I guess, we spoke about the core being one of the important differentiator across multiple different operators on a 5G. And today operators have flexibility of choosing multiple different vendors to deploy the exact same core with differentiated services, as been depicted there as well. With that, what happens is that the number of testing cycles have actually increased significantly, at least 1,000 times. One comment that we got from an operator, a leading operator in Australia, was that the number of test cases that we run on a 5G network today, is close to 60 times a month per function. And imagine 5G today has close to 26 functions, 26 different cloud native network functions. And that's the amount of test cases what you typically run to be able to validate and certify a respective node before it is ready to be deployed on the live network. Right? One more trend what we've actually seen is that in the past, operators used to rely upon the performance benchmarks testing done by the manufacturers. But of late, we are seeing that operator itself having their own internal lab, to be able to do the same kind of testing. Second thing is they're also setting up something called as a pre-production lab. So you have a lab, a fully dedicated lab with all multiple different vendors, functioning in tandem, etc. Next, you also have something called as a pre-production lab, wherein the kind of test cases that we talk about, as there was a comment made, right, a lot of data gets consumed indoors, that is maybe at home, maybe in the offices, but that's data consumption. But imagine what happens during the transit between your home to your offices. Data is not consumed, but then you start seeing a lot of control plane signaling happening, in that transit. So what we do is, while you try to measure, the performance, this pre-production network that is being set up these days is trying to replicate those real-world scenarios into the luxury of a lab, right? And that is where we play a very important role there as well. Now, to be able to ensure that there is this parity between the kind of test cases you execute in the lab, and then you start resonating that along with this kind of test cases, what you typically do within the live network as well, a continuous testing approach has to be definitely involved. So what's very important in this particular infographic is that it's always important to have that common shared library of test cases, right? Like for example, today, if you talk to multiple different operators, probably they might do a very in-depth specification-based test cases. 23501, they run thousands of test cases there, certify your respective node. When you go to the field network, all that you typically do is you make a call, you send a SMS, and then you probably make some data transaction, right? 3 or 4 test cases what is actually being done, as your acceptance testing in the field network, right? Now that has to change, which means the live network should also get subjected, to that exact amount of test cases, or at least similar, to ensure that there's a robust deployment that actually an operator undergoes, which means a cycle that's completely continuous, plays a very important role in ensuring the seamless migration. Now, to be able to do that, that's the end goal, what every operator or every, I would say vendor is trying to achieve, is that you take a respective network function, be it containerized, be it virtual network function, for example, that actually gets uploaded on a weekly basis, for example, with new versions, new builds, enhancements, etc. It has to go through not just the network function testing, but starting with the infrastructure itself. First you go back and then test the infrastructure. Find out if that particular infrastructure is able to handle the load, is been able to deliver that amount of latency. If I say that I'm not able to go beyond 20 milliseconds of latency today, on a 5G network, who could be the main culprit? Is it your radio? Is it your core? Is it respect to network function within the core, or the policy itself? There are multiple different factors. So we are typically seeing customers first test the infrastructure, and then they do a functional validation of a respective network function, and then they do a performance testing, and then they subject that one to an end-to-end testing. When I say end-to-end testing, you do something like a voice call, you do something like a data call, for example, WhatsApp video, Facebook video, etc., right? And then you do, and then the actual feedback gets subjected into like a catalog to multiple different bodies as well. That's the end goal that everybody is trying to meet today from our learnings. And I'll probably give you a couple of use cases. The first one, when we started off with an operator, was very early stages of 5G. Was that they were mainly concerned about 3 network node functions: AMF, SMF, and UPF, the main functions of 5G. Their main goal was, how do I certify these network functions for release 16 phase 1 specifications on 23501. So what we did was, what generally used to happen is that the ones in the dark blue there defines the typical task that nobody can escape. You first go back and then you define what your test plan is. Once that is defined, you also define what is your acceptance criteria, to qualify your respective vendor, for example. What happens after that, to be able to set up a lab, to be able to configure the devices, to be able to run those massive amount of test cases, etc., and then perform those, acceptance test criteria, is what is time consuming. It should probably take more than 6 months to 7 months of time. Yesterday, somebody spoke about deploying a 5G network in less than 2 weeks, or maybe one respective network function, for example. So that was obviously possible by being able to approach, the second method there, using through automation, for example. So what we did was that in this particular case, we were able to read through the entire 23501 specifications. We were able to convert those specifications, into a series of test cases. In this case, close to 360 test cases. And then those were actually run in a repeatable fashion, irrespective of multiple different versions, updates, and software loads, etc., right? Which actually saved a lot of time and eventually money as well. So that those repeatable way of testing plays a very important role for you to be able to launch a network in less than a couple of weeks or months, for example, right? The second thing, obviously, we all know that Dish was the first one probably in the US to roll out the network on a public cloud. And what we did there was that we used this library of test cases that was actually built into the product. And while the core was being deployed on the cloud natively in automated fashion, the tester was also invoked to be able to run the same exact amount of test cases continuously, so that the launch actually happens much faster compared to the previous ways of deployment. Second thing is the use case that we did with one of the leading operators in Philippines, is that along with being able to test the network functions and its functionality, we were also able to validate the underlying infrastructure itself, the under cloud and then the over cloud performances, to be able to compare and be able to exactly isolate which respective component. Is it your infrastructure? Is it your COTS server? Is it your hypervisor, for example? And how much of latency every single element there is contributing to your end-to-end call that's been experienced, right? We have also extended the similar concept into the live network, because I was trying to preach about being able to have that parity between number of test cases in the live network against lab as well. So we were able to put those agents onto the live network, and then use that agent's functionality to be able to give you a kind of a measure of the health of a network. Kind of do something like a predictive monitoring to understand how the network is actually behaving. And if something goes wrong, you probably get to know ahead of time to be able to solve that. 3 different use cases, very interesting use cases. One in the lab completely, one in the live network completely. I did see that a lot of presenters were also echoing, to be able to build a successful 5G ecosystem in India, we need to upgrade that particular skill set as well. That plays a very important role. And Spirent, as a leader in 5G, the one that you see on the top, on the extreme right there, is an entire rack of solutions called as digital twin, right? Meaning, starting with the devices, starting with the base station, a core network emulator. If you talk about ORAN, for example, a CU emulator, for example, you talk about satellite simulators, etc. The entire rack gives you the entire replica of the 5G network. So being a test and measurement solutions, you typically will be able to configure far more scenarios than what you typically see in the live network. We spoke about network slicing, network slice security, right? So you have like a non-public network, and then you have a specific slice card out of that particular public network. How do you ensure that the latency, the SLAs of that particular slice is being met? So what we do is the tools are able to simulate the slices and then be able to do the performance testing and functional validation of that respective slice. It goes pretty deep, And with all this testing, we've been seeing a significant reduction in the time to test, etc. Just to give you a glimpse before I actually wind up, is that that kind of represents all the different kind of nodes, networks, functions that Spirent supports today. Maybe we spoke about lawful interception. Imagine we spoke about those encrypted traffic like Facebook and WhatsApp and voice calls and CSFB all happening. To be able to test that amount of load, to be able to test that amount of functionality, how do you generate that load? So the tools are able to simulate circuit switch fallback, SRVCC, voice over NR, voice over LTE, for example, fallback into EPS, etc. So we give you respective node simulations that completely complies with 3GPP, so that you'll actually be able to simulate or wrap around a respective node. So if you look at, for example, the first example what I gave you, AMF, SMF, and UPF are the primary components, and you want to validate network slicing. The missing function could be NSSF. In that case, the tool will be able to simulate NSSF, and then ensure that that respective slice functionalities, your slice descriptor, slice type, etc., can be populated into your AMF. Accordingly, the UPF selects a respective slice and stuff like that. So it goes pretty deep on the kind of use cases what the solution actually provides. So we have seen, we have actually put certain numbers to this with respect to the percentages. There is a race for sure for 5G. Everybody wants to roll out 5G, and what actually helps, for you to be able to roll out 5G successfully, is to try to utilize that amount of, I would say, experience what multiple different companies have done. We kind of seem to be in a perfect spot right now, because you'll be able to reutilize the existing same amount of test cases. You don't have to go back and then certify the 23501 experience what we carry, what we actually bring along. After having been worked with multiple different vendors across that we saw, can play a very vital role in rolling out faster 5G as well, right? And every node that you saw in the previous slide complies with the specification of 3GPP, which means that it's completely vendor neutral. As long as any vendor claims and that he supports this respective specification, the interoperability should work out of the box. You don't have to go back and then tweak the messages to be able to ensure that the load testing actually happens, right? That's the kind of percentage-wise savings what we've done. You're able to roll out the networks much faster, at least 60% faster. We did a kind of a math based on our experience with one of the manufacturers and operators to understand how much that actually led to savings. If you recall my first use case, of being able to test the 23501 specification, we were able to estimate, I think, close to $2.7 million of savings, and at least 6 months faster to the market in being able to run those test cases in an automated fashion. So we provide those automated packages, that will help you validate our respective network functions, right? Today's focus is actually on 5G. The amount of time what we have is just not sufficient for me to go back and then talk a lot about what 5G has to offer, what Spirent has to offer. We have a booth here. We'll probably be able to spend more time in detail once you drop by later. And 5G is not just one solution that we actually cater towards. There are multiple different domains that we play a role in. Wi-Fi, SDN, we spoke about transport, etc. So we have solutions that are able to cater multiple different segments of the 5G network. 5G is like a cream of the underlying other supporting technologies as well. All your SDN, NFVs, they all act like a supporting technologies to enable 5G, right? So multiple different domains that we play upon. We'll probably have a chat later to understand more on 5G. That's my last slide. Any questions?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kishore. I think that was very interesting. Before I hand back to the organizers, a thought just came to my mind, like I checked how many of you had bought a smartphone. How many of you do not have fiber to your residence? Just raise your hands. Only one does not have fiber. Everybody's got fiber to the home. That's just wonderful. I was trying to look for some more people, customers for fixed wireless access. Okay. Anyway, so the other good news is, there's a huge amount of positive sentiment in the country. As was shared, India today per smartphone user is consuming about 13 to 14 Gbps per month. The next nearest is South Korea, which is about 8.7 or 9 Gbps. They've had 5G networks for the last, let's say, at least 4 years. We've not got a 5G network, but the demand for data, the ability to consume data in India is terrific. And imagine when you have a 5G network coming up. So, you know, that's real great good news. And from the government as well, government has set up state broadband committees in all the states, because a lot of, you know, regulatory and policy stuff is dependent on states for right of way. And from COAI, we've been trying to get the government to announce a broadband readiness index of states. So when you do a happening Haryana, amazing Maharashtra or whatever, there is a digital, you know, rating of the digital network. So that would also attract investments. Thank you very much. I think you as an audience have been lovely. Please join me in conveying your appreciation to the panel here with a round of applause.
Thank you very much.
Thank
indeed,
you,
sir.
and back to the organizer.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, sir. We also thank all our eminent speakers for the wonderful, knowledgeable and informative presentations we had from them. And I would now request our distinguished session chair, Shri Vikram Tiwathia ji, to kindly do the honors of presenting mementos as a token of gratitude and appreciation to all our speakers. We begin by presenting to Mr. Sandeep Nagpal. Thank you, sir. To Mr. Manoj Gurnani. Thank you very much indeed, sir. To Mr. Gilad Ben Arai. Thank you very much indeed, sir. To Mr. Mike Stewart. Thank you very much indeed. To Mr. Deepak Saxena. And to Mr. Kishore Kumar. Thank you, Mr. Tiwathia, for doing the honors. I would now invite Mr. Shashidharan, Managing Director, Bharat Exhibitions, to present a token of gratitude to our distinguished session chair, Shri Vikram Tiwathia, Deputy Director General, COAI. Thank you, Mr. Shashidharan, for doing the honors. May I request for a group photograph of the panel? And ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a quick 15 minutes tea break. I would request everybody to be seated back in time, as we are already running behind schedule. And today we need to conclude our sessions in time, as you all are aware of the traffic restrictions that are going to be implemented later in the evening because of the Central Vista inauguration by the Honorable Prime Minister today. Thank you. And kindly be back in time for the next session in 15 minutes.